summer's equinox, the autumnal tumble over the celestial pivot point. Darkness begins to subsume us once again. Our old friend, emerging from within, challenging us with winds, cool winds of time and change, emanating echoes of our pain. Having blown the warmth from our lonely bones as we sit naked before the setting sun, the moment now has come. The echoes call us back into the dark, back into the deep, infinite sea of unknowing. It's time to drink down the boundless emptiness again, to remember nothing here is real, most especially the thoughts that grip you so tightly. The void enfolds you back into the long, dark slumber of night, returning to her peaceful breast, reconnecting with death, where the endless cycles of breath finally come to rest. There is nothing. The show is always coming abruptly to an end. Or is it just the beginning? Even the leaves are dancing as they fall, as if they bear no cares at all. Stillness rules the soul, and you, my love, are always free.
Yes, I love that. Is that an original poem?
Yes, and I wrote half of it like right before this.
I love it. Right when you started reading, I was like...
Hi, I'm Corrin. This podcast is called The Ache, an ode to the existential ache of being human. That still small voice tugging inside every single one of us, prompting us to change, move, grow, become more of our authentic selves. This is conversations with people who dance with the ache.
So, in thinking about the title of this show, The Ache, it kind of pulled me into this place that has been so present with me for so long. And it has led me on this journey of trying to understand, what the fuck are we?
That is the voice of Melissa Mira. She is my coach and a friend of mine, and someone that has helped me understand myself so much better over the last 3 years. She's wise, she's grounded, she's a beautiful person inside and out, and she has a lot of wisdom to share.
And that has taken me, on twists and turns and shown me incredible beauty and also incredible darkness. And it's led me to come into this world of unconscious integration coaching, where I get to explore with people all parts of them, the parts of themselves that they love, the parts of themselves that scare them. And we work to make peace and integrate all those pieces to really bring out the gifts that are present in all of them.
And it works. I can attest to that. I think, like, selfishly, I was hoping through bringing you on the podcast that I would get to, both while I share with the audience and for myself, hear more about your story in terms of how you came to this work, because obviously it's not a typical thing for people to be attracted to. The part that so many of us push away is the part that you're going right towards. and the title of the show, The Ache, it's about that. It's about like the aching part of you and going towards that, and then what happens like as you dance with it, as you commune with it, and that is a part of your day-to-day work. And it's atypical. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about how you came to get into this, and like a little bit, as much as you want to, as deep as you want to go, as verbose as you want to be, or as brief as you want to be, about your journey with your ache, your calling to come into this kind of work.
Yeah, so the first memory that comes to mind is when I was very young, and it was before I had a brother or sister, so I was an only child at the time. My brother and sister are 8 and 10 years younger than me. So I was probably 6 or 7, and I just felt lonely a lot. I saw other kids with brothers and sisters and playing with them, and I had friends, but like you go home and there's no one else there, it's just you. So I would spend time outside. I would, go out under the moon and just kind of like walk around in my backyard, and I have a distinct memory of being out there one night, just walking under the moon and questioning what this all was, what this experience was. And really feeling that first ache, moving away from the innocence of childhood and feeling like there was a deeper question that I was gonna need to answer in my life. And at that time of my life, I also was very connected to the idea of magic. And I had my own little ritual that I did. If there was something that I wanted, I had this ritual that I did where I would hold the thing that I wanted in my mind, and then I would cross every part of my body. So I would cross all my fingers, cross my arms, cross them across my chest, cross my legs, wrap them around each other, and then I would squeeze my entire body so tight until I felt like this shiver happen. And it was like, if I did that, I knew that I could get the thing that I wanted. And around that same time, I started to question if that was actually real. I started to question the validity of magic. I started to hear, these ideas coming in that like magic is silly and it's not real. And I let go of that part of myself. And it wasn't until much later on that I started to reconnect with that again. And a big part of that was I had a dear friend, and she lived actually up behind my house, so I could walk up the back hill, like through the grass, and get to her house. And I made friends with her a few years later. It was years after those experiences, but she was really a person that I could be fully myself with. I could be so silly and ridiculous, and we would have these dance parties, just the two of us. We would put on music and we would dance around like crazy people. And it was in that relationship where the loneliness that I had felt prior felt like it was dissipating. I had this connection with someone where I could be in the fullness of myself, and I could start to express in a way that I didn't feel like I had the ability to before that. And that kind of reconnected me with like an optimism, and that optimism reconnected me with the idea of magic. And a lot of my magic from that point moved into like somatic movement, predominantly dance. And she and I, her name is Jen. We're still friends. She lives in San Francisco now. We started going to live music together. And this is just now about the time before I leave for college. And we attend like a few concerts and we start dabbling with psychedelics. And in these experiences of, taking mushrooms and then going to live music and then dancing, I started to touch this power that existed inside of me that I remembered from this little ritual that I did. So now it was like, now I could just dance and hold on to the things that I want while I was dancing. And it was like the same thing was happening inside of my body that happened when I, crossed myself all up and then squeezed as hard as I could. Like I would have this momentary like quiver that is, it's almost like an orgasm, but it's not an orgasm. And I think it's similar to like a kundalini release. But this was happening through these movement experiences, particularly these ones that were improvisational and happening with live music. So it wasn't anything that I talked about much for a long time, but it did start to pull me into the realm of esotericism. And it's like there's so much material out there that, my previous dismissal, I was able to, find writings that felt really, really powerful and really true. So that really started to bring me back into that whole realm of understanding. And as I began to delve into that realm, and I'm now working, with psychedelics, mostly recreationally, but in a way that felt really ritualistic and sacred to me. I started to tap into what I would later realize was the unconscious mind and the power of the unconscious mind. So that was kind of like, a bit of the beginning of the journey. And then, I'm not really thinking about it as a career at this point at all. It's just like, this is my interest outside of all the other things that I do. And it was actually many years later that I had children and left my previous career of working as an environmental engineer to be home.
I love that. I saw that. I didn't know that about you, and I saw it maybe written somewhere because I was doing like a little bit more research about you, like, preparing for the podcast and stuff. And I saw that written somewhere and I was like, Melissa was an engineer.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because my favorite part about being in engineering school was math, was like logic and mathematics, and how like everything always equates, and then as I'm stepping into the realms of exploring, mushrooms here and there, I'm beginning to see the math in the world. And as I'm dancing with live music, there is a thing that's happening inside of me where it's becoming very mathematical. So as I'm hearing the music, I'm kind of hearing where the music is going to go before it happens, because there's like an equation that's being worked out in my body. So the whole thing, I didn't really understand it, but I really loved it. I still really love it. It's really my favorite thing in the world. I'll do it, at the drop of a hat if there's an opportunity. But it was, I was working as an engineer. I stepped away from that to be a mother to my kids and be home. And at that point, it really gave me an opportunity to spend, the little amounts of free time that I had here and there, raising the kids, to focus on what really lit me up, what I was really passionate about. So I got deeper into, yoga. I was teaching that for a while, and movement. And then as I'm raising my children, I have this realization that I need to kind of be in charge of their health. So as I'm raising them, we're having experiences with the medical system where I'm just recognizing that I'm not aligned with a lot of the medical system, and if there's something that happens, I need to be able to fix it myself or figure it out myself. So that really sent me on this path of understanding health more deeply, and eventually I had people asking me if I would help them with their health. And that was a career that just kind of emerged because people drew me out from what I was able to do, with my family and with my own health. And I really liked that a lot. I was a health coach for a few years and was having a lot of success with it. But then I was realizing people would get over one thing and then a new thing would pop up. So I started to recognize there's something deeper here in control of what's happening with these clients. And I also noticed it with myself. And I really, at that point, had begun to dig into this journey of my own subconscious, and then made the connection that the healing stuff that I was doing with people, it actually had a lot more to do with their subconscious than it did with physical elements or chemical elements. And I just felt like it was the next step in helping people really find health and happiness. And I've kind of been there ever since, learning all of the different ways that we can actually reprogram the mind. And then more recently, understanding that there is a map that specifically ties to the physical symptomology. I say that in quotes, and what's happening on the deeper subconscious levels, which I know I've talked to you a little about in some of our calls.
Absolutely. And it's all so fascinating. My personal journey with health has been, all the plenty of mysterious, quote unquote, mysterious illnesses over the years where I'm man, I'm going to the doctor. They're telling me, yeah, there's something wrong with you, but here we're not really sure why, but you're probably just stressed. And I'm can't get any help. And then the next thing you know, I'm doing emotional resolution work or things like that end up then my body is responding and fixing itself, and my adrenal failure is reversing, and with no medication or anything. And so for me, I've always been very open to this because of my own journeys, my own health journey. But I feel that people I don't want to like generalize, but I don't think there's any way to say this without generalizing, but I think most people, or like often many people, are very resistant to this idea, or this idea that, you know, health is, there is such a deep emotional or subconscious connection between your health and those emotions and thoughts and feelings. And so I wonder I wanted to ask if you, on your journey with, going from being an engineer, an environmental engineer, which is very like societally accepted, like, I guess like normal, quote unquote. I mean, it's not normal still, but like, especially for a chick, right? But like, you know, a more like matrixy, like real world job to something that's more on the fringes of what is widely accepted. And my question is like, did you have to go through anything within yourself from point A to point B to get okay with that? Or were you always just like, I'm okay with being on the fringes?
I have always, well, I shouldn't say always been okay with being on the fringes, but definitely moving into motherhood was a point where I really recognized, like, this is where I feel more comfortable. And I have been pretending that I was okay, like, in the mainstream, but really I wasn't. When I got pregnant, I was like, I need to get out of this job. Number one, because, you know, I got into environmental engineering because I thought I was going to help save the trees, you know, and that's not what I ended up doing. I was working for the government, and it was more like, well, how can we do this as inexpensively as possible? So I was kind of on the wrong team. But also, yeah, I really started to recognize when you become a mother, there is a huge shift that happens in you. There's like, you know, your former identity is just kind of like ripped away, and you have this moment of just like floating in like, who am I? And at the same time, you now have this tiny little life that is depending on you to like know what to do. So, yeah, there's just this moment of like, who am I? I need to be authentic so that I can give this child the best chance. So through that experience of becoming a mother, I started to let go of like worrying about what other people thought, and got very comfortable in being a person that like questions everything. And, you know, first and foremost, questioning my own thoughts and beliefs, questioning, you know, things that I believed for a long time. As I started to see, you know, how illusory some of those things were, I just wanted to know more. For me, my main interest is truth. Like, I want to know the truth. And, you know, I think what you said is totally valid. Like, a lot of people aren't ready to hear that what's going on with them physically is connected to what's going on with them psychically, because I think it's scary, because it means we have to take responsibility for our own minds. And most people have no idea what's going on in their minds. And a lot of people are scared of their minds. Just like what you said, it's like we have to look at what darkness is in us. And I think a lot of people would prefer to just go to the doctor and have them tell them, like, take this pill and you'll be fine. You know, that sounds a lot easier than exploring the painful parts of the psyche, right?
Yeah, entirely. entirely. I mean, it's changed my life personally, like being willing to like go towards the thing that I was told would ruin my life if I went towards it, you know, because you know my backstory, and I think by this point that the episode comes out, people will know a little more about my backstory, which is being raised very religious, and like that feeling of like your desire, these things that are popping up in you are from an evil source that is trying to take you down, from a devil that's trying to trap you and take you down. So, you know, I had that imprint, that subconscious imprint of like, oh my God, anything, everything, all of the above. And working with you was a big part of that for me, of moving into a space of allowing things to arise that I would have previously tried to like stomp down on, and working with them and looking at them and not needing to make a big narrative and a meaning out of it every single time, sometimes maybe, but letting them flow through. And, you know, also a big reason I started the podcast too is just like people like you and other human beings in my life who are like, let me fuck around with this darkness, quote unquote, this part of me that's a little off the beaten path, and see where it takes me.
Yeah, I mean, number one, the subconscious, it's 95% of our lives. It's 95%. So if we're not willing to look at that, we're not fully alive, you know? We're not fully engaged in our lives, because all of this is just happening out of programs that we have built through the experiences that we've had. So the only way to really step into our power is to start to look at these things and start to question, like, is this thought actually serving me? Is this belief actually serving me? And I personally have had enough experiences where I believed something so fervently that when I took the opportunity to consider the opposite and then saw that that was just as true, if not truer, it really started to shake the foundation that I had been standing on. And I'm glad that it did, because it was not a stable foundation. And by doing that, we have the ability to unlock the gifts that exist inside of us. Like, so often these, you know, it's Jung that termed it the shadow. These shadow frequencies that exist in us, they actually hold a gift inside. So if we just, you know, tiptoe around, push these things down, we are denying the world these gifts that we have inside. And also, like, we're probably not feeling as alive as we have the ability to feel. I am personally someone that will show up in a space and just like have a really good time. And I'll dance around and I'll act, you know, a little bit wild. And I see like kind of a longing in people's faces. You know, some of them will be like, okay, is this lady crazy or what? But there's a longing that you can see in their faces of just like, I wish I could do that. And the truth is, we all can do it. And it would be a much more beautiful and fun world if we did. If we just kind of like drop the seriousness that we have the stiffness that we have around so many situations and just like allow ourselves to be free.
It's of course it's correct that this is coming up right now, because Lily, my writing partner, who you know and who is on the podcast as well, and I have been talking about this a lot. We've started calling it like looking over the fence, because one of the script that we're working on right now deals with a character that is basically like starts kind of, she has all these walls built up around her, and she starts letting herself have fun in certain circumstances, and then is like freaked out about it and is just like, oh my God, like I looked over the fence that I built, I looked over the walls that I built, and I see all this beauty and this vast, landscape of like fun and freedom. But I think it can feel, every time the mail comes, I about have a heart attack. It's so loud. I don't know if you could hear it. It's like my mic does noise muffling, so maybe not, but it's like someone is right there, like putting the mail in the slot. But the conversation that she and I have been having a lot is about when you're not used to being weird, quote unquote, and like dancing around in the space and letting yourself feel free, it can be a really scary feeling, outside of the containment or outside of like whatever the familiar zone is that you were living in before. It can be almost scarier to actually enjoy your life.
Yeah.
Or to like let yourself let go. That's been my personal journey over the last 2 years, is like, can you have fun? And I'm like, no, fun is terrifying. I mean, I can in like spurts and bursts, but like the idea that my life could potentially be more enjoyable than not enjoyable is something that I've been, as you know, but working with, and it really brings up a lot. And obviously the work that I've done with you has been so helpful for that. But I don't know, why do you think that is? I mean, I have my thoughts on why I think it is, but
I mean, there is something that happens to us between the time when we're kids, just to witness children, like in the woods playing or on a playground, just playing with abandon, is so inspirational, because you can tell they don't care what anybody else thinks. And there's a point, just like I remember in myself, where I believed in magic, and then I was worried that people would think I was crazy because I believed in magic and it couldn't be real. Like, there is something that happens in the maturation process where we kind of like steal that innocence away from children. So for me, having children and spending so much time with them was so liberating, because they're not going to judge you. They think it's awesome if you act crazy. So for me, like, that has been a huge part of it. It's just like, I have kids and kids are crazy, and actually they're often having a way better time than you are. So why not take their example and use it? Like, actually, just life doesn't have to be so serious. And it's like, when we make it serious, now it feels serious. So for me, like, showing up on multi-generational dance floors when there's kids, I'm just like, yes, awesome. Like, let's get down.
Yeah,
and then like
they're into it. They're gonna jump around with you.
Totally into it. Yeah, it's really inspirational. So yeah, I think it is so much that we are so worried about what other people think. And that is all just happening inside of our own heads. for the most part, it's not even the experience that the people around us are having. They're worried about themselves. They're worried about how they look. So there's just all this energy that's being siphoned off us, being concerned about something that isn't even real. And that's, so often like what we're doing in unconscious integration sessions is we're looking for those thoughts that are creating the discomfort and keeping us from like really being in our authentic expression.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, even some of the stuff that you've had me do over the time that we've been working together, if on the surface, it seems like a silly little thing, like writing the story, like the story I wrote about the bird, right? Or like creating, I can't remember what that one's about. It's like personifying yourself as an animal or something.
The shape-shifting.
The shape-shifting, yeah. And you write, that one's quite absurd too. Just the shape-shifting, imagining yourself as like an object or an animal. Yeah. And you're like, how is this going to help me? And then you do it and something changes. Some energy changes. Energy moves. You feel it. You see the results in your physical life around you. And I think to your point and what you're saying about kids is there is like, when I think about kids, I think about how fast they change states, or like how quickly like you can go from falling and crying and emoting and then like you're up and you're excited about the PB&J and you're running around. And it's like I see that within myself, that ability to change states rapidly, or to be down and then up, and I feel my mind tugging me into like, no, these states should be very prolonged and you should be more worried about the fact that you're changing states and perhaps you're a crazy person, like, like all these things, versus when, and through my work with you, just learning to not narrativize everything and not need to add additional meaning to things that don't need it, and just flow through the states more and be like, what do I need right now? And tap into that and do the shape-shifting exercise or do a little energy release or dance around somatically, whatever, and just allow myself to go in a new state. It's very liberating, but it's also a bit of a mind fuck, because your mind wants to be like, that is not how things work. I need to be very worried right now. And you're like, but the more I practice it and the more I just flow with it, the less the mind is coming up and trying to tell me those things. And I do credit my work with you. A lot of that, the work that we've done together is I think why that shift is happening within me.
It's incredibly powerful to recognize how much control we have over our state in any given moment. Because again, yeah, like you said, witnessing children, how they can move from state to state to state. And then over time, as we grow and, mature, we start to lose that ability, but we don't have to lose that ability. We have the ability in any moment to play in our imagination. And it's through that play in our imagination that everything comes into form. Everything. And it brings me back to the Kabbalion, the book. The universe is mental. The universe is mental. And I just keep seeing this again and again and again in every area of life that I dig into. It's all about what's happening in the mind. And I have had the most vivid experiences of being able to change my state. For example, I had one experience where it was wintertime and I didn't have enough layers, and I was so cold. I was just freezing and I was shivering and I was huddled over and I was just in my mind like, I am so cold. I am so cold. But I was indoors. And then I just had this momentary thought of like, what if I'm not actually cold? And I rolled my shoulders back and I sat up and I uncrossed my legs, and all of a sudden, I was not cold anymore. And it's just like having these moments and recognizing how convincing our stories are. It really leads me to the place of like, I want to analyze my stories and see which ones I really want to keep in place and which ones I don't. So it's like at that point, I want to take a fine-tooth comb between all the thoughts that are coming up in my mind and being like, is that a piece that I want to hold on to in my experience? Because we have the ability to let go of any thought that pops into our minds. Not only that, we have the ability to think the opposite thought and decide that we're going to commit to that instead, if that's more in alignment with what we actually want. We give away so much of our power by just believing every thought that pops up into our minds. And it's, by coming back into the body that we can reconnect with truth. The mind is always making up stories. And it's like, there is so much happening in our experience at any given moment that we are filtering out, but we're connecting with pieces that are creating suffering for us. So when we recognize that this is happening, we have the ability to be like, okay, instead of putting my attention on this thing that is creating suffering for me, I can just put my attention on something that makes me feel good.
Yeah. And it's so simple, like conceptually, it's so simple. And then you go to practice it and you're like, it's like that little trick that's kind of everything in life is like, could it really just be this simple? Like, could it be? And then you discover, like, so often in life, or at least I have discovered so often in life, it is. The thing that I was doing when I was a kid, telling stories, making films, making plays, writing, having my touring a cappella group with my sisters, like my favorite shit to do ever, which all boiled down to storytelling. And for so long, like my life, internal turmoil, fighting myself over it, and like now just being like, what do I love? I love telling stories. It's the same thing. And feeling like that wasn't possible for me to do for so long, and what all these wars in my mind, and then now coming back to it in the simplicity, just using this as an example of that simplicity of like, I love this. I'm doing it. It's fun. I'm having a good time. And, of course the mind tries to come in and be like, are you sure? Should you be having a good time? It's your job. You should be having a terrible time. And it's like, no. When I come back to that simplicity every time, when I come back to just like, what's fun about this? What's fun about this right now? And leaning into that rather than leaning into, whatever story my mind is trying to run away with, my life just becomes more fun. Simple as that. Becomes more enjoyable.
Yeah, it really can be that simple. We can make it more difficult. We can make it more difficult because, if we don't take care of ourselves and we don't get enough rest, then we can be in a place of low energy, and then we can be like, well, I don't even have the energy to do that. But it's kind of like, if you do that, then you start to feel better, then you want to take care of yourself. So it's a spiral. It can be a spiral up or it can be a spiral down. It just takes us deciding which way we want to play it.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I'm trying to think. I feel like we got into like pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. Do you have anything burning that you want to share?
Anything burning that I want to share? I mean, yeah, I think we've mostly covered all of it, and I think the emphasis on the ability that we have to tap into silliness, into joy, into wildness, into craziness is like so powerful. And we're living in a world where there's so much, devastating turmoil happening. But I think that the way out of that is to spend more time focused on like, how do we pull ourselves out of that? How do we move out into the world and reflect joy around? Because that will continue to spread and opportunities will emerge to help in certain situations. And I have found that the most potent help is bringing lightness and joy. And, when I say that, I think there's also a space for sadness, and there's also a space for anger and for grief. But it's when we get stuck in those places that it becomes a problem. Like for me, I very much honor all the emotions that come forward. And sometimes I just need to like sob and wail and tear at the grass beneath my feet. And then when I'm done with that, it's time to dance again. And it's just like, we have to remember to keep coming back to the joy and to the lightness and to the innocence that children show us, so that we can create more of a space for that in the world.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you for listening to The Ache. This podcast is produced by myself, Corrin Evans, and Alexis Murphy. All the music you hear is original compositions by my friend Peter Colombo. All other pertinent information will be linked in the show notes, and thank you for listening.